Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to today's reading lesson. We're actually going to be doing some review this week. So this week, we're going to be talking about retell. So I can retell stories, including key details, and demonstrate understanding of their central message or lesson. So today, we're focusing primarily on retell. But before we get into our retell lesson, let's go over this week's sight words. This week's sight words are van. Say van. Van. Good job. The next word is they. Say they. They. Good job. The next word is of. Say of. Of. Good job. The next word is there. Say there. There. Good job. And the last word is also there, but it's a different there. So say there. There. Good job. Alrighty, so we're actually I'm going to move you down to my anchor chart. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm going to move you down to my anchor chart there. Remember, we've gone over this. This is the retelling hand. So if you hold up your hand, don't forget the setting, right, is your thumb. The characters is your pointer finger. The problem is your middle finger, so what went wrong in the story. Remember, setting is where the story takes place. When does the story take place? Characters, who are in the story. Problem, what goes wrong in the story. Events, this is where you're talking about beginning, middle, and end. And then the final one is the solution. So how is that problem solved? And then remember, the lesson or central message is in the palm of your hand, but we'll get into that more throughout the rest of the school year. Alrighty, so that's our retelling hand, okay? So remember your retelling hand as we read our story. Now, I don't own Enemy Pie, which is our story today. So what I have to do is I actually have to share my screen, and we're going to watch a video read aloud of the story Enemy Pie. A teacher, they always dip into their resources. If they don't have a book, they usually look for it online. I've done this many a times. I think I did it a couple weeks ago with Ivan, the remarkable true story of the shopping mall gorilla. So that's what I'm going to do today. So bear with me. I'm going to present my screen. Oop. And then I'm going to make this large.
Welcome to Book Pals, Storyline Online, brought to you by the Screen Actors Guild Foundation. My name is Cameron Manheim. You may know me from the practice, but I hope not, because it was on way past your bedtime. Today, I'm going to read Enemy Pie, written by Derek Munson and illustrated by Tara Callahan King. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in the backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been the perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out at the baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline. I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse, where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too. But he knew a good way to get rid of them. And I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. And he pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. And inside, there was a worn out scrap of paper with faded writing. And Dad held it up and he squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic, and I begged him to tell me something, anything. I'll tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Of course, that got my mind working. What kind of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he needed those. I gave him the gum that I'd been chewing on all morning. He gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck up on the roof. I threw a boomerang and it never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it was going to look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask my dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he had made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked my dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There's one part of enemy pie that I can't do. And in order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross, and then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house, and I knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood at the other side of the screen door, and he looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. And he looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. And he came back with the shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighborhood girls. But we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. And after lunch, we went over to my house. It was strange. I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell my dad that since he'd been working so hard to make the enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished that he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house into the backyard. And when we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And Jeremy Ross wanted in. Can we go in it? He asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch. Did did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. I climbed up ahead of him and I tore the enemy list off the wall. Whew. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, but when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner, my favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about the enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie, and I watched as he cut it into 8 thick slices. Dad, I said, it sure is nice to have a new friend in the neighborhood. I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy, but Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. And he passed one to me and one to Jeremy. Wow, Jeremy said, looking at the pie. My dad never makes pie like this. It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something. And Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth, and he crumpled his eyebrows and he looked at me funny. I felt so relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. Well, if it's so bad, Jeremy asked, then why has your dad already eaten half of it? Well, I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. Good stuff, he mumbled through a mouthful, and that was all he said. And I sat there watching him eating enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. Seemed safe enough. So I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he was going to teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy.
Alrighty. So that was enemy pie. And when we're thinking about retail, we're going to do a quick little retail activity together where we're talking about character, setting, and then what happens in beginning, middle, and end. And then we're going to go over your seesaw activity. I absolutely love that story. I just think it's so endearing and sweet, and it really helps kids understand what an enemy is and how you can become friends with your enemy. So let's go ahead and go over our retail activity that I have on the smartboard. So while that is coming on, I'm going to turn off the lights just so you all can see a little bit better. So looking at our retail, okay, right? We're looking at a retail. Don't forget your retailing hand. First, what I want to talk about is who are the characters in the story? So who are the characters in Enemy Pie? So remember, one character was the boy or the son, right? And then another character, important character, was Jeremy Ross, right? Okay. What about the setting? Where and when did the story take place? That's right. You could say it took place mostly at the boy's house or in his neighborhood. I'm running out of room. And then it was most likely during the daytime, right? For the most part, during the day. And then I'm actually going to move to the next page so that we have more room to write, beginning, middle, and end. And I'm going to put what happened in the beginning. And you could do this in your notebook. Often we make B, M, and E, so beginning, middle, and end. What happened in the beginning, the middle, and then the end, B, M, E. What happened in the beginning of the story? Right, that the boy swore that Jeremy was an enemy. Now, I'm not going to write this, but why did he say Jeremy was an enemy? Why did he say that Jeremy Ross was an enemy? And he hated him, remember? Well, he hated Jeremy because Jeremy didn't invite him to his party. And then he also hated Jeremy because he struck him out in baseball. So remember, he didn't like him because he didn't invite him to his party, and then he also struck him out in baseball. So he said he was his number one enemy. So what did he decide? What did the boy decide to make? The boy decided to make, and he asked his dad. He asked his dad to make enemy pie. And remember, the boy decides that he's going to go and get like dirt and bugs and rocks and sticks to put in the enemy pie. And the dad's like, no, we're not going to use that to make enemy pie. So then the boy decides that he's going to go over to the house and he's going to ask Jeremy to play. And then the boy kind of realizes after he spends some time with Jeremy that he's having fun, right? He's having fun with Jeremy. And then he invites Jeremy over for dinner, and they both have macaroni and cheese. Remember, and macaroni and cheese is both their favorite food. And then they have enemy pie for dessert. And what's that boy starting to feel? He's starting to feel bad, right? Because Jeremy is now his friend. So he tells Jeremy to do not eat the pie, right? But then he realizes that the pie is good, and he and Jeremy become friends, right? So him and Jeremy become friends. So if I went back to my retelling hand, I talked about the setting. I talked about the characters. I talked about problem, right? Problem was that he was his enemy because he didn't invite him to his party and he struck him out in baseball. Talked about beginning, middle, and end, the events, what happened first, what happened in the middle, and what happened at the end, or what happened last. And then what was the solution to the problem, right? So kind of the solution was that they decided to hang out together and they realized that they were good friends, right? So those are all pieces for the retelling hand. For your seesaw activity today, what you're going to do is you are going to, I'm going to take a second till it shares. Okay. You are going to, if you need to listen to Enemy Pie again, go ahead and click on the link to listen to Enemy Pie. Then what you're going to do is you're going to click Add Response. And I have our anchor chart here for you about the retelling hand just to help you if you need it. Then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to look at each of these pieces. So the characters, the setting, the problem, how is he feeling right in the middle of the story, what's going on in the story, what's the action, what's happening at the ending, and how does the character feel at the end. So you're going to tap on the microphone and record yourself using that retelling hand, what happened with the characters, character setting, problem, solution, beginning, middle, end. So you're talking about that use the picture cards here as you're retelling to help you remember what happened throughout the story and what to include in your retell. So make sure you tap that microphone to record yourself retelling the story Enemy Pie. Then when you finish, you're going to hit the green check to turn it in. If you need to, you can always come back and rewatch this lesson. If you need a review on the retelling hand or retell or Enemy Pie retell, because we kind of did it together. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye.